when your husband loses his job, which is the thing that gives him great significance, and he's out of work for a while, he's trying and trying, how will you deal with that? What happens? What will happen to you if one of your parents gets a divorce? How will you deal with that? So I throw out all these scenarios to them, and they're going, wow, I never thought about any of those before. I'm just thinking about, rich or poor, sickness and health, But I really haven't thought about how will we handle that. Because I may have shared with you that when I was at the Medina Baptist Church, the youth pastor there preached a message, and shortly after he preached the message, just a week later, he came down with a son who had Duchenne's muscular dystrophy. Okay, if I shared this with you, stop me. I didn't. Okay. Okay, and so it put a huge wedge in their marriage. They never thought about that when they said for better or worse, rich or poor, sickness and health. They never thought at all about that. And those things either put wedges between you or they bring you closer together. They make the glue stick better. Okay? So when we make those vows and make those covenants, they're very significant. Turn with me, if you go back to Genesis chapter 15. Genesis chapter 15. And when you get there, let's go to verses, Genesis 15. And let's go to beginning of verse 9, I think, and we'll go down through verse 18. This is God making a covenant with Abraham. In fact, I think Pastor Brian mentioned this a number of weeks ago. Genesis 15, beginning of verse 9. So the Lord said to him, "Bring me a heifer, a goat, a ram, each 3 years old, along with a dove and a young pigeon." Abraham brought all these to him, cut them in two, and arranged the halves opposite each other. The birds, however, he did not cut in half. Then birds of prey came down on the carcasses, but Abraham drove them away. As the sun was setting, Abraham fell into a deep sleep, and a thick and dreadful darkness came over him. Then the Lord said to him, "Know for certain that your descendants will be strangers in a country not their own, and they will be enslaved and mistreated 400 years. But I will punish the nation they serve as slaves, and after they will come out with great possessions. You, however, will go to your fathers in peace and be buried at a good old age. In the 4th generation, your descendants will come back here, for the sin of the Amorites has not yet reached its full measure." Now, those are a whole bunch of prophecies that God is giving, promises he's giving. When the sun had set and darkness had fallen, a smoking firepot with a blazing torch appeared and passed between the pieces of the animals that had been cut in half. On that day the Lord made a covenant with Abram and said, "To your descendants I give this land, from the river of Egypt to the great river of the Euphrates, the land of the Canaanites and all the other ites that are mentioned in that verse there." What happens in this covenant-making thing? This is the way they made a covenant in the Old Testament. It was very important. They took animals, cut them in half, laid them open, and generally the two who were making a covenant walked down together between those animals that have been cut in half. That's not, however, what happens here. What happens here? What happens to Abram? He fell into a deep sleep. Who put him into the sleep? God did. Who walks then through the split animals? God does. God walks through the split animals. What does that signify?
This covenant is not dependent upon Abraham's performance.
Exactly. It is an unconditional covenant. Okay? If the two of us walk down together, okay, sometimes we're making a conditional covenant. I will do this if you will do that. Okay? But when God walks down beside, just by himself, and Abraham's asleep, God is saying to Abraham, everything I'm promising you will come to pass. Because I'm making this unconditional covenant with you. Okay? It is not conditioned on what you do, how you do things. It's not conditioned on you at all. It's just conditioned on me. Now go back and think about the covenants that you made. What kind of covenant did you make? You probably made a conditional one. He said, well, yeah, for better or worse, as long as she's better, I'm not worse, or whatever, one of those things. For better, you probably made a conditional covenant. You didn't think about it when you made it, But you probably did, okay? But what God was thinking, no, you made an unconditional one. See, we always say, now you're here making this covenant together, you're making it before your friends and family, you're making it before God. And so God's listening to the covenant you make. God intends it to be an unconditional covenant, not conditional. But we generally think of it as conditional, don't we? We generally think, if she does what I want her to do, it'll work out okay. If she just gets straightened out, or if he gets straightened out, it'll be just fine. Okay? But that's not what God's asking us to do. I think one of the greatest examples of an unconditional covenant was J. Robertson McQuilkin. J. Robertson McQuilkin was the president of Pontiac Bible College in South Carolina. And, he just had a tremendous ministry there, and as the president of the college and everything. And then his wife began to develop Alzheimer's. And he resigned as president of the college. He said, my responsibility is to take care of her, not the college, not my child. And so he resigned, and he took care of her, and she went into Alzheimer's very, very quickly, and he has been taking care of her ever since. I don't know how many years that is now. I forget exactly when it happened. But that's an unconditional covenant. That says, I will take care of you for better, worse, richer, poor, sickness, and in health, as long as we both shall live. That's a commitment. That is a covenant. Now, I gave you slips of paper, and I want you to turn the page to page 44 and 45. Because it says, question 1 says, when you first got married, how solemn and permanent did you consider your vows? How fully did you understand the nature of that covenant? Question 2 says, some traditional wedding vows are listed below. Rate how well you feel you've kept each vow in your marriage, with a 1 being the lowest rating and a 10 being the highest. That's why I gave you the paper, so you don't have to, since you're sharing the book, okay? So, I would like you to go through these ones which says to have as a whole, which is how well have you bonded and held to your husband or wife. For better, for worse. I'm sorry, there are other ones here. Okay, sorry. For better, for worse, how stable is your treatment of your husband or wife, regardless of the circumstances? For richer or for poorer, how well does your marriage stand up to financial pressures? In sickness and in health, is your marriage affected by health struggles? To love and to cherish, which refers to your accomplishment of the principles in Ephesians 5 from the last session where we talked about submitting and loving and honoring and so forth. And I place my faithfulness to you, or are you faithful to your husband or your spouse? One of the things there, in sickness and in health, just to tell you a little bit about our marriage, my wife's mother could work and work and work. I mean, she'd get up at 5 o'clock, she'd do a little laundry, she'd probably clean a room in the house, then she went out, she worked full-time at a daycare. She came back home, her husband had to have supper at 5, he was diabetic, so she'd come home, she'd make supper, she'd do some other cleaning in the house and so forth, and she'd go to bed. She'd get up the next morning at 5 o'clock and she'd do the same thing. I really liked her mother. That's really good, man. And I thought that her daughter came equipped the same way. And she doesn't. She gets tired. Okay? She can't go at the pace her mom went. And so I'm thinking, well, wait a second. When we took these vows, rich or poor, and all this is what I expected, in sickness and in health. And it wasn't that she was really sick a lot, but, there were times when she was. Consequently, or on the other hand, she thought that she was marrying somebody like her father. I'll go on the flip side. She was marrying somebody like her father, who could do anything. He could work with wood, he could work with electric, he could work with plumbing, he could work with cars, he could work with all those things. I came equipped with none of those things. None. Because my father, I say this literally, hardly changed a light bulb in the house. I'm telling you the truth. I re-wallpapered my parents' house. I did all of that. My father did not do any of that. So I didn't come equipped with any of that. So she's expecting that I come equipped with this, and I expect her to come equipped with that. Neither one of us came equipped with either of those things.